interoperable. Cooperation, very limited. We all know that. So what are the key issues here? So the two primary issues that we will be talking about in this paper is poor user experience and poor corporate cooperation. We'll also be talking about an example of what's available today and how can we use that for the next metaverse. So here's a workable definition. And again, like we said, there was a definition we thought about, and this is what we think will work. It may need to be tweaked. It's something to think about. So we look at the metaverse as a constellation of microverses that are multidimensional, realistic, where people will perform tasks like buying, selling, commerce, fashion. All these tasks will be performed in the metaverse without the constraint of physical space or time. Where it's a unified metaverse where you'll go into one microverse and out without dropping out of 3D. You don't have to get out of one, log into another, drop out of 3D. So it'll be seamless. We believe the metaverse will emerge as a property of the current 2D web. So today we look at the web. The next web will be inside the web. So with interconnection and interoperability between these microverses, this will be provided by the web itself. So the web is our platform. So what do we need? We need an open web-based immersive 3D standard or standards, real-time 3D, or like Mark called it this morning, browsing the metaverse. And then we may need an avatar standard. We need improved user experience and improved user security. And the most important one is cooperation, because your standard or your technology is as successful as its adoption. So creating real-time 3D is easier now. And 3D assets can be reused today. There are many tools available to create 3D. Many technologies and specifications are available to create these 3D worlds, but very few are used globally and very few are global standards. So we looked at many proprietary solutions and we thought about, what standard would fit for what our definition is calling for. So the standard that we looked at was X3D because it provides a unique proposition where you can quickly integrate existing 3D systems into a proven framework that's royalty-free and it's ISO ratified. And most of our applications that we saw within X3D were enterprise applications, and they were serious 3D applications, not just gaming and social platforms. So what is X3D? X3D is a specification that's developed by the Web3D consortium. It's ISO ratified and it's royalty free. It's a scene graph for real-time 3D. It provides a system for storage, archival, and playback in real time and supports many domains and user scenarios. It's a presentation layer for scene description, which includes behavior. So what does X3D? It's originated from VRML. It has a large set of 3D nodes for 3D modeling. It's declarative 3D, unlike imperative 3D, which is WebGL. That's for graphics programmers. X3D is for web authors. So it becomes easier to build your content, to author your scene. It has many profiles based on your use case. You do not have to use all the profiles. If you have a simple application, you could just use the interactive profile. But if your application is complicated, you could go to the immersive profile. It has many components and it has several nodes to pretty much do everything that you need in 3D. It's a file format and runtime. Many encodings, XML, VRML, JSON, you choose what you want. Again, a language, a presentation layer to add 3D models, GIS data, scanning data, AR, and more into one system, into one 3D applications. Assets reused across different domains. And then there are open source implementation too. So this is a time-tested, proven implementation. So these are all tested out, and these are open source that's available to anyone. Again, we have 3D, VR, AR, interaction, collaboration, animation, humanoid animation, runs on multiple platforms, are used in multiple domains. It's the greatest common denominator. So here's a very busy slide, but as you can see, this is the ecosystem. You can bring data from any domain, use any of the tools, use X3D for authoring. You can inline GLTF assets, you can inline images, and then you publish it. Now, again, I think Nicholas gave a good example. GLTF is an asset. So you just bring this good looking asset of a car. But if you want to turn the wheels, if you want to put some light on and get it really looking classy, if you want to add some animation, you want to add sensors, you can do that with X3D. GLTF is just a 3D asset streaming format. You just bring in your asset, but we play with all standards out there. We play well with everyone. You want to use GLTF, we'll allow you to do that. You want to use an image, we'll allow you to do that. Any format that's available out there that's open, we will support it. So here are the standards that are ratified today. It's the X3D4 and HNM. So I thought I would talk a little bit about, we're talking about avatars. So a little bit about how do we represent a metaverse human with open standards. So there are varied levels of avatars. You can create an avatar in X3D. It could be a spider, it could be an octopus, or it could be a very accurate human avatar. There are different levels of detail and also articulation. So you may want your avatar, which has a lot of information, but different security levels. Your doctor may want to use your avatar with your scar, with your tattoo, whereas your wife may only want to see the tattoo. She doesn't want to see the scar, but the public doesn't want to see the scar nor the tattoo. So you can choose what level of security you want to use. You can use it through metadata. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Basically, you can build a scientifically correct avatar, or you could even build a spider if you need to. So you have the spectrum to create those. We don't have an avatar standard today. Some best practices would help us define one. And because every gaming platform has their own specification for an avatar, how do we communicate with these avatars? We don't know. So I think thinking about open standards, standards that are ratified, that have been proven and tested, could be good for the industry. So here's the workflow of the H&M model. I won't go too much in detail about this, but basically you would get your data from your scanner, you would add a motion definition, and then you would go to a viewer. Here's another slide where we are showing different level of articulation. It depends on what kind of skeleton or avatar you need. You can add the level of articulation you need. There are many implementations out there. That's another reason when we started analyzing different solutions and technologies out there, we looked at where can we find some examples. So here there are several examples here. Please, the slides that will be up on the side, you can go check them out. Some of these have been developed 10, 20 years ago, and they still work. Again, data integration is very important. And Chris Lane mentioned today during the panel session, using X3D as a payload, as a container, using X3D files for your metadata, for your headers, and how do we communicate with these X3D peer applications. So data integration is easy in this open web environment using X3D as a container, using metadata, information, and web security. So here's an example of how you could add your metadata into any node in the scene graph. Here's a slide that I got from NIH 3D Print Exchange. They are using X3D for their printing their 3D models. And why is metadata important? Because there's so much information that can be included in your model, whether it's an avatar, it's a CAD model, whether it's a 3D printed model, all this information is available in your metadata. 3D body data. So again, data from 3D scans, surface materials, you can use it for clothing, dermatology, plastic surgery, 3D printing. And we also have the volume rendering component, which uses geometry and dimensions from images to create a 3D volumetric model. There may be a use case in the metaverse for this, but right now it's been mostly used in the medical field. Use cases, humanoid animation, avatars, security-informed consent, CAD models for clothing, stents, prostheses, 3D printing, visualizing geospatial data. So these are, our members are using this, and they're using it for enterprise 3D, serious 3D. So this is a very important slide, extending standards by engaging with other STOs. As you can see, our X3D, and we work with Web3D, W3C standards. For geospatial, we work with OGC. For medical, we work with HL7, with IEEE, with Chronos. We support GLTF, WebGL. So we are playing well with everybody here. So our goal is, you want to use X3D, there are all these other formats we support. Bring your data from anywhere, present it in X3D. We are the presentation layer. Bringing back this, build, author, and publish. So what do we need? Okay. So we covered the open web-based immersive 3D standard. So that's what X3D provides you. We talked a little bit about avatars. Let's talk about improved security and improved user experience. Okay, so this is really, really important. But we didn't, in our paper, we don't talk much about it because I think there are many questions that we don't have answers for. There are a lot of human factor issues that we need to consider. We just highlighted a few. We need to train computers about people. AI will be very important. Training devices to communicate with people. Training devices to recognize our everyday interactions. All these will be important in the metaverse. Improved headset design and also improved content design, because of all the issues that we are having with the headsets, the cyber sickness, the motion sickness, there is even vomiting. So all these issues have to be studied, and it's tricky. And I think for the metaverse to go to the masses, we may also have to find out a way where we don't even need an head-mounted device. Is it possible to have an immersive experience without a head-mounted device? I know there are some studies that are being done right now, creating models in such a way that you may not need a head-mounted device. Improved security. Carol, this is for you. How are people protected? How will accessibility concerns be addressed? How will one reliably opt off if you have privacy issues? Okay. Data to last lifetime, it's important. So encrypted data containers generated on enrollment. So you create your data, it's secure, it's your data, and it's private. NFT type licensing, that could be a possibility. A Web 2.0 is a chaos for personal privacy right now. So if the metaverse has to be successful, we can't repeat what is happening in Web 2.0. One of the thoughts we've had is we could have a global setting on the browser or the OS for privacy that takes advantage of the World Wide Web security stack. So the last but not least is corporate cooperation. Okay. So it is possible for, aligning technologies and standards for an interoperable metaverse. We expect a large ecosystem around the metaverse. There will be many 3D assets needing runtime interoperability. If we all play together, the creation of the next workable metaverse may happen. Now, adoption is a measure of success, right? So we have to see who will adopt which standard. And my next slide will talk about that. We don't have to adopt all standards. We may just need a few. It's okay. We all play together, use what we want, and produce something that's open. So the recently formed Metaverse Standards Forum, when I created this slide set, it was 1,800 members. Today, Neil mentioned there are 1,900 members. So they are increasing every week in hundreds. So everyone wants to join this forum, and it's a good thing. I guess they are going to foster interoperability standards here, identify what are the existing standards as a registry that they have created, foster data requirements. That's very, very important. Find use cases, and then test open source data. And we are very optimistic about what Metaverse standards will offer this community. And hopefully they'll help us have an open metaverse this time around. So Web3D Consortium is the member of the Metaverse Standards Forum. Our standard X3D is listed in the registry, and we are optimistic, and we encourage all of you to join, because it's not just for standards development organization, it's for users, it's for producers, it's for content builders, it's for everyone. Let's bring it up to 3,000. Now it's 1,900. So adoption is a measure of success. These are some companies that are using X3D or have used X3D. So as you can see, this is all serious 3D application. So I think this is a very hard problem, and it's going to bring many new opportunities. So what are some of the questions we need to really ask ourselves? What resources and technology will your brand need to develop a presence in the metaverse? Do we understand the data? Do we understand the application? Is it just games? Is it enterprise? Is it commerce? Is it health? Do we have most of the requirements to restart the metaverse? Some are calling it Web 3.0, some are calling it Web 4.0. And what role will you play to manifest a successful metaverse this time around? So I think each one of us here has a role to play. The real world is merging into the virtual world. The time has come for cooperation, serious implementations, and further standardization. The future, it's our aspiration that we could have a metaverse with aligned standards that is open, easy, secure, and interoperable. And that's it. Thank you. And I really want to thank Nicholas, Don, and Bill for helping me with this paper. And they are here with me to answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Anita.
25 minutes, not bad.
Excellent. So thanks for the presentation. Are there any questions in the room right now?
Carol has a question.
Okay, so you mentioned that you were bringing in avatars from other sources, like, so they would still be bringing in the OBJ file and the SDL file. How do I get away from OBJ and finally shoot it and get rid of it?
All you users and content builders have to just say, we are going to go to X3D. We do not want to use OBJ. X3D has so much more to offer.
So my question is, though, I'm importing the data. So am I importing it as a point cloud? Am I importing it? What step am I stopping to not get to OBJ?
So you
Anita, can I try that one? Can I try that one, Anita?
Sure.
Thanks. Yeah, great question. The answer, we love everybody, and we will convert you and use you. And the fact that we might have a template from Metaverse standards means we can cross the threshold to easy. We had a meeting 10 days ago. Said, well, okay, let's list what avatar stuff we've already done. I thought we were going to get up around 8 or 12. We had to quit at 2000 because, at 24 because the clock ran out. So it's not can we, it's how do we make it easy? That's our challenge for the new year, Carol. And and maybe everybody in that room is an expert. Over.
So we do have converters from OBJ to X3D?
Yeah. No, we don't. Even when working with OBJ files or BX files, it's very difficult to convert them as HNM and to import them in X3D. Basically, we are losing most of the work, which is the not the ringing, but the assigning of the weights to the let's say that it's not the ringing, it's the the binding of the cloth or the skin of the avatar to the bones. Okay, and this information is mostly lost in all converters, unfortunately, which makes that you end up in the end with an HNM that is a porcupine or something like this, exploded star. And we're missing any kind of modeler that is able to spit out HNM, if not X3D, but at least HNM. And converters, there's no one that really makes it all. Unfortunately.
Okay, go ahead, Don.
Yeah, please send the example in so we can work on it and see if we can't tease best patterns after that. Could I point out something? Mike Seide used a technical term in the first talk. He called it sucky. HTML was pretty sucky for over a decade, meaning the engineering wasn't quite ready. We think we have everything. All we have to do is make it faster, better, build these converters. That's what our new year is all about, is making it easy, making it great. Over.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So this gets us to the second talk, defining the metaverse through the lens of academic schooling and news articles and social media. And the presenter is Karen Works, and she's in the room right now, but she had technical issues and will show just a video, but will be here for questions afterwards. Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. So we show the video first and then have a discussion afterwards.
Today, I'm presenting our research on defining the metaverse through the lens of academic scholarship, news articles, and social media. This is a joint research project between me, Nathan Green, I'm a professor at Marymount University, and Dr. Karen Works, who's a professor at Florida State University. We came upon this research as we were working on some educational tools in the metaverse. As we were working on these, we were seeing increasingly different definitions, different topics, and some very troubling different sentiment towards how people spoke about the metaverse. Depending on the resource that you look at the time, you might get viewpoints where people describe the metaverse as this virtual fantasy land where anything is possible. You can make unlimited money, unlimited creativity. You may also run across different articles or different resources that describe it as a dystopian wasteland where people are enslaved to a virtual machine. And these are clearly very different definitions and different viewpoints on the subject. We'll first look at some of the common background that a lot of the different articles, whether academic or news or social media, point to as prime examples of the metaverse. The first and most often referenced source that appears is Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. This was released in 1992 and gives us our first use of the word metaverse. In the novel, it's referenced as a virtual retreat location that people can go to when they're bogged down by their regular lives. And we see this theme reiterated in books and in movies such as Ready Player One as well. When we get to the results section, we'll see whether this idea that this is a retreat and something that is separate from our regular lives will play a part in the overall sentiment and the topics that are extracted. The second example that we'll look at, and one that's often referenced in literature, is Second Life. For me personally, this was my first entry point into the metaverse back in 2003. I think to this day, it is still probably the reference point for a lot of people in the computing industry. It's considered by most to be the first full implementation of metaverse concepts. Up to this point, you've certainly had some online worlds in terms of BBS systems, some online role-playing games, but they didn't fully integrate all of the virtual concepts as well as Second Life did at the time. I think by all accounts, it's been a pretty successful metaverse. Up until this point, from 2003 to 2022, there's been 66 million accounts registered. Over the last year, there's been an average of 40,000 concurrent users a day. So I still think it's going pretty strong given how long it's been out on the market. Since when we get to the topic analysis in this research, we'll see there's a large focus on money potential and economic potential of the metaverse. It's important to note, you can see here in the virtual goods, that there's an estimate GDP of about 600 million US dollars in Second Life. While Second Life was primarily a desktop application, the metaverse currently in all literature is mostly referenced as an application of virtual reality. We will see when we get to the results of our topic modeling whether or not this truly was identified across all mediums. Virtual reality has certainly been around for many, many decades, and it has moved from scientific laboratories into academia, and now in the recent decades into consumer goods. I think the first time that I ever really truly experienced virtual reality was actually at an ACM SIG-Chi conference back in 2003. At that conference, it was literally a desktop strapped to my back with goggles on my head, and we've certainly come a long way since then. For better or worse, when people think of the metaverse today, often we were seeing that people were pointing to the consumer goods side of things. With Facebook's acquisition of Oculus, they were able to deliver consumer-grade VR units into the market in great numbers. One aspect of our research was to see whether academia or these industry leaders were driving the definition of the metaverse. Meta in particular is trying to drive the metaverse with their app called Horizon Worlds. In many ways, this is very similar to Second Life, just in a VR context, and very similar to some other metaverses that exist in VR currently. Both due to the commercial-grade VR units that are now in the market from Meta, as well as their rebranding as a company called Meta, we wanted to see how much of the company themselves drove how others wrote about the metaverse. All of that said, I think we all know individual instances of different metaverses out there that we all particularly like as an example. There are certainly much more than the 3 or 4 that we just went over. These are just the prime ones that seem to come up over and over again in the literature. When looking for an overall definition of the metaverse, we didn't want to point to one specific example of a metaverse, but we wanted to extract different topics, different keywords of how people write about the metaverse to see if we can get kind of an aggregate idea of what people think it is. Obviously, this idea of what it is will change dramatically depending on who is writing on the topic, how educated they are in the topic, how much they use the metaverse, or whether they use the metaverse at all. In order to conduct this research, we had to make some assumptions on the data that we could collect. So to start with, we collected academic data. So for this, we looked at the ACM Digital Library, and we collected 165 papers. We also wanted to see how the news media reports on the metaverse. So for this, we collected 191 news articles, and these vary from CNN to Fox to TechCrunch to different blogs that are out there. Now, the news reporters on this are usually tech reporters at a particular company or various journalists that deal with tech in some form. But we also wanted to look at how social media might respond to the metaverse as well. For social media, we decided to harvest Reddit. And on our Reddit harvest, we wanted to look at two separate types of Reddit groups. So one is a general search that retrieves different Reddit posts for anything relating to the metaverse. The other, we wanted to essentially look at true believers, right? So these are people who are posting to the actual metaverse subreddit. The idea behind this is one would get kind of a general social media audience, and the other one would get a social media audience that is very focused and very passionate about the subject. And again, like most research, there are other sources that could be collected, and this research could be extended in the future, but we wanted to at least set up a baseline to see what type of topics, what type of sentiment are being discussed around the metaverse. We'll now take a quick look at the methodology. As you can see in this process flow, we have our inputs, which are our 4 different types of data: the academic publications, the news media, the 2 different types of social media. Each one of these data types kind of has their own challenge for how to clean them up. The ACM publications come in via PDF, and for these we have to use PDF text extractors, which sometimes leave off characters, or occasionally a word will be slightly out of order. For harvesting news text, we have a web scraper that goes through to harvest the text, and these can also harvest ads, boilerplate headers, copyright notices, and things like this. For each one of the news sites that we harvest, we have to also remove all of the HTML and JavaScript from the extraction. The API for extracting text from Reddit is by far the simplest. For the Metaverse subreddit, we download the entire subreddit, and then for each post, we combine all the comments together into a singular text file per post. The Reddit search, on the other hand, does not come from a singular subreddit, but will search for posts relating to the metaverse across different subreddits. Now, after that, it'll work much the same. It'll take all of the comments for a particular post and add it to a text file. So at this point, we have text files for each one of these groups: the academic publications, the news media, and the 2 different social media Reddit groupings. At this point, we want to get everything into a consistent form. So the first step is to lowercase all text. So it doesn't matter if someone is talking about capital M metaverse versus lowercase m metaverse, it'll get collected as the same form. Now, a typical process in natural language processing or any text processing is something called stop word removal. Stop word removal makes the assumption that the most common words in a language, so in English, the, of, a, and, as, if, things like this, are not particularly useful to the overall analysis of the text. So in order to get more accurate text and more important text, we remove all of these from all 4 documents. Once these are removed, we go through the process of tokenization, which in the most basic case is pulling out the singular words of a text document. In our case, we went one step above, that we didn't want to just look at singular words, but we wanted to look at bigrams. So we wanted to look at 2-word combinations. So if we were trying to analyze virtual worlds, regular unigram tokenization would tell us how often the word world was mentioned in frequency of each 4 of these text documents. But a bigram would tell us how often virtual world was mentioned versus, for instance, how often the term real world was mentioned. After this, we went through a process called synonym replacement. This is an effort to reduce sparsity in our tokenization. So for instance, occasionally someone would spell the metaverse with a space in it. So it would be meta space verse. And we want to go ahead and replace that into a singular term, which is common. This way, when we actually do frequency analysis and we compare the documents against each other, we'll have a common base set for the terms that they use. At this point, we have clean term data sets for each one of our mediums from the academic, news, and our different subreddits. So from here, we want to do some topic modeling. So we chose to do non-negative matrix factorization. You may also be familiar with LDA. We actually performed both, and NMF gave us slightly better results on our topic modeling. So that's what we're going to report here today for you. For those unfamiliar with NMF or any topic modeling, we'll take a bag of words in an unsupervised fashion and give you an amount of topics from those documents. Really, the only thing that you're in control of are kind of the stop words, the tokenization process, and that N for how many topics you actually want to extract. So given that process, we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the results here. So this figure represents the total frequencies of all the bigrams in the documents. It's a stacked frequency chart. So the blue will represent the academic publications. The orange will be the news media. The green represents the Metaverse subreddit, and the red represents the general Reddit search for Metaverse. So the overwhelming term, should not be shocking to anyone, was virtual world. And I would say from the looks of it, it was generally used in everything pretty heavily with the exception of the Reddit search. The second highest frequency was the term Second Life, which was used pretty heavily with everyone except the news media. So I think this is pretty great that an actual implementation of the metaverse was getting such high coverage. Now, the different uses of this differed greatly when you actually looked at it in the social media. Some people referencing kind of new metaverse takes as that's nothing more than Second Life again, and others giving proper credit the Second Life had done this. Or just giving historic context for the development of the metaverse overall. The third term really brings in our first technology for it, which is virtual reality, which is the general consensus on new metaverse technology is that it will use virtual reality. We'll also see another technology in the fifth spot, augmented reality, which was a bit of a surprise that it was this far up, given that most of the coverage is around the virtual reality technology. You'll see in the fourth spot there, the bigram real world, right? So this was often used as contrast to the metaverse, sometimes in a negative sense that people just wanted to fix the real world without looking at the metaverse. And other times it was the contrast of this virtual world versus a real world implementation. Now there's lots to look at here, but I'm just going to draw our attention to a few of them in here. In the ninth spot, we had Mark Zuckerberg. So much like we talked about before, this has to do with kind of the rebranding of Meta and the implementations of the Oculus and Horizon worlds for it. You can see in this frequency that it was almost entirely driven by the news media. There's actually 0 references in our ACM publications. You will also see that outside of academia, the other 3 mediums also cover the idea of this virtual real estate, the idea that you can buy and sell real estate in a metaverse. In terms of the topics that were just covered by academia, you had things such as human factors, virtual objects, group-mediated experiences. So we can get a general sense that academia was focusing on the overall experience and interactions that are involved in a virtual world. Now, these frequencies are driven by the mediums that had the most amount of documents, of course. Now, you can compare via the colors across each other if you like, but we wanted to do a topic analysis as well to see which topics each one is talking about outside of just their frequencies. So topic extraction is an unsupervised technique. So in the end, we had to apply a label to each one of the extracted topics and terms. So you'll see the labels that we applied over there on the left under topic. Each one of the mediums was then checked to see if any of its extracted topics fell under any of these labels. So if we were using this topic extraction to come up with a common definition of the metaverse, it is pretty clear that VR has to be a prime component of that. Each one of the mediums talked extensively about VR in one way or the other. Augmented reality, on the other hand, was talked about in 3 of the 4 mediums. It did not appear in the Reddit searches. Now, a common use of VR is often the gaming industry. Games only came out as a topic in academia and in the news media. It appears the conversation of the metaverse stuck strictly to the virtual world and not so much as another platform of gaming when it came to social media. Now, the next 2 topics came out exclusively for academia, and those were graphics and human-computer interactions. So SIGGRAPH conferences, and this conference had a lot to do with the graphics topics appearing. There's a lot about optimization. The other prime academia topic was human-computer interactions, and there was a lot about avatars, which had its own category here as well. Both academia and the news media did cover artificial intelligence as it relates to the metaverse as well. And academia also had a topic revolving around software engineering. This contained a lot of code and repositories in this topic when we looked at the actual diagrams that appeared. Now, I think one of the more interesting points of this research is what we're not covering as academics. This doesn't mean that we should be covering it, but it does mean that the narrative about the metaverse is getting out there, is being put out there by news and social media, and doesn't necessarily relate to the research that we're putting out. So this was primarily around the company Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, a lot to do with security. Two that I was kind of surprised were not covered in academia very much was different ethical issues around the metaverse. Some of this had to do with fraud, harassment on the security side. And I imagine this will come in academic research as time goes on and more cybersecurity professionals also get into this topic. One topic that was not covered in academia but was in the news and the subreddit was the idea of an open sourced metaverse. This is somewhat a backlash to one company getting most of the publicity around the metaverse these days. At the time of harvesting the data, there was also some news cycles around a bunch of companies coming together in a consortium to kind of make an open source metaverse policy. And this group was being talked a lot on the particular subreddit for the metaverse, which I kind of define as the true believers. So they also have this vision as this open sourced virtual world that we can all connect to. The other two topics not really talked about in the academic literature was that of cryptocurrency and real estate. So kind of both financially oriented when we look at how they're covered in the social media and the news media. But at this point, given that in academia, it's mostly being covered by the SIGGRAPH and the SIGCHI communities, this is not a primary topic of their concern. But as it spreads through more academia, I would imagine we start to hit some of these topics. After topic modeling and the basic frequency analysis, we wanted to give one more look at the data. The overall frequency analysis is kind of drowned out by the top diagrams, right? So virtual reality, augmented reality, virtual worlds, and so on. So we decided to look at an attribute called keyness, which is the log likelihood ratio of the frequency of the terms against each other. So for instance, the keyness for ACM would be the frequency of all the biograms in the ACM documents versus the frequency against all other documents. So the news, metaverse, and the Reddit search all combined. And what we get out of this are the terms that are overused and the terms that are underused for each medium. So we'll point out some of the interesting parts here. For academia, you can see that we don't really focus on social media, and we certainly don't focus on the corporations that are involved in the metaverse. You can see the news overly focuses on the corporations involved in the metaverse and the particular technologies, but really ignore a lot of the academic side of the research on the metaverse. And for the social media, both the metaverse subreddit and the search, you'll see that they're interested in particular projects such as VR, chat, particular crypto projects. And you'll also see some negative terms when it comes to the Reddit search in terms of nobody wants the metaverse and things like this. So in terms of an overall definition of the metaverse, well, certainly from our results, it needs to involve virtual reality and possibly augmented reality with virtual worlds. But whether or not it'll go the way of virtual experiences, as discussed in academic papers, or it'll go more of the way of virtual financial opportunities that are found in the news media and social media, well, I think only time will tell which way that will go. I'm hoping that as researchers, we can get our vision of the metaverse out a little more than we have. So thank you all for your time, and I hope we can answer some of your questions now.
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation or the video. So we have 5 minutes for questions in room or online.
Thank you. This is great. It really does give a whole nother kind of perspective to the activities and the mission that we're working on here. So thank you for this work. I think it's fabulous. Is there maybe I'm just thinking in general, and probably there's not a right answer here, but are we still even maybe biasing this a little bit by just looking at these sources? I think sometimes, maybe there are ethical discussions, but they're just not in this ACM indexed venues, and maybe a broader search or an expansion of this methodology might show us some new aspects.
That's definitely a valid point. I think we were just trying to make a first kind of scrape at it. One of the things we have talked about, because we do see this terminology kind of evolving over time, it would almost be interesting to do like a time study to see this is what it was at this point in time, a little bit like what your approach was, but using the approach of evaluating the articles. But yes, that's certainly a valid approach.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think these are that would be fascinating, because there's a lot of these discussions and concepts are evolving kind of quickly.
Right.
I wonder, is there in the terms of the topic modeling, is there something that we could see, like this is a suggestion for the future, maybe a network graph of some kind of how concepts and how they relate, maybe, or their distance from each other, that might give us a quick way to track those changes in the future.
Nathan?
Oh, yeah. This doesn't have a sound on.
Can you activate me?
But yeah, so maybe that's kind of a detail of InfoVis, maybe. But I think there's a bit of methodology that we could might provide some more insights as well. Okay.
Okay, I think I have mic access now. So,
awesome.
yes. So we have this all in a GitHub repository. So I could just remove some of the data and have the code available so people can input their own data sources. And I think that would be very useful, because we have more, as Karen pointed out, we have some more results in there in terms of time analysis of we were able to do for everything but the news, because it was a little hard to harvest some of the past news on the topic. But yeah, I would certainly be interested in just opening up our GitHub repository, so those who are a little more skilled in some visualizations than I am can also contribute to this. And we can also look at this over time, right? As when we looked at the actual frequency of ACM publications that mention the metaverse, it's clearly exploded in the last 2 years for it. So as time goes on, I think this will be an interesting methodology to revisit to see how it's changed.
I absolutely agree, and I think it's really great because it gives us some data to actually base our opinions on.
Right.
So it's really valuable for the conversation. Thank you.
I have just a very small question. Do you have the classification for this last years of citations of the metaverse for ACM according to the fields? For example, is it only in computer science, or maybe you have different fields? I saw many things on business, of course, or art, or different fields. But is it only on one field, or did you put all the citations in the same?
So I can answer on the ACM side. This was I did it manually through the ACM digital library. So every paper that came up for a metaverse term in the ACM digital library, but we only access ACM, and this would have been a harvest at the time of around May. For it, and there have been some conferences since, but I didn't restrict it specifically to one type of conference in ACM. So anything that came up under that
Okay.
is currently in there.
It's just about if you have a rough idea of, even in ACM, there are different classes of conferences, of course, and with the keywords, maybe you can quickly check which fields are more concerned.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, I can do an aggregation of how many papers came from each conference on there. Because I think to the previous point as well, that would lead to the ethical discussion. There could possibly be other kind of sub-conferences too that maybe aren't quite referring it as the metaverse, but are still part of this conversation.
Right.
So it would be interesting to see that distribution.
I'm also just wondering, could you include other sources like other, for example, Facebook or? It would be interesting to see how the topic evolved inside of Facebook while changing to Meta. So that could really be something. Would be interesting.
A lot of the social media now have apps that allow you to download the data, like Twitter. You can download the tweets about certain topics. So that currently it could be done in the same approach. Yeah.
Good. Okay, thanks. So this brings us to the last talk in the session from Nicholas. He's also in the room. Luckily, designing for social interaction in virtual art gallery.
Okay, thank you so much. I love the ideas coming up here, and certainly, you know, students make the world go round. So I can imagine Nathan and Kathy, you all have lots of things ahead for your groups. And I'm really pleased to present some of our work. Actually, it's our students' work. From Virginia Tech. Last spring, I taught the capstone class for human-computer interaction. Okay, so this is seniors in computer science who have been working through our HCI track. Okay, there's a few specific classes that will help them sort of specialize in this area. And they're really putting into practice, right, what they've learned about user-centered design, the method, the process, and putting it into action. Okay, so the way we kind of set this up was I had a menu of interesting topics. The students self-selected in terms of what they wanted to work on at the beginning of the semester. And the goal was to go through a complete cycle of design, prototype, and evaluate. Okay, and they only have a handful of weeks to do this. Okay. So it becomes really important that we can find this method and apply this method in a practical way, and also have prototyping tools that can let us, you know, answer some question to a certain fidelity of prototype quickly. Okay. Now these are all CS majors, so they're technically, you know, proficient, and now we're getting to put kind of those lessons that they've learned into practice. And so I'm very pleased to present their work, and it is a little bit different than some of the other papers typically in this conference, because it's not so much about the technical things, right? It's got that human right in the center. The human is the loop, right? And it's making this whole thing work. And what is the technology doing for the human, right? And so a lot of the value, I believe, in this paper comes out in terms of the requirements that they were able to derive, some of the features that they were able to prototype and test, maybe a little bit more than the fact that you know, it was not a full study, you know, with dozens of participants and a statistical analysis. So, so let's dig in. The COVID time, I think, was a big motivator for our students, at least. You know, once we got separated by such distances, you know, this became a really practical thing of value, right? To be able to join an online space, manipulate some data and information, share and communicate. And so the students were really interested in kind of reimagining this and trying to understand, you know, what are the important things from a social point of view, and specifically about in kind of art experiences and viewing art, multimedia art. So they kind of came up with their goals, which was to really kind of bridge the distance of accessibility, right, and distance. With their prototype. Okay, so essentially this is the process, right, that we've worked through and taught them through our HCI coursework. Right, is we're deriving you know, some kind of a root concept or a problem statement. That's what we're trying to design towards. Right, and then we're going to collect a bunch of data to see if we're going to solving the right problem. Right, so we're going to look at some observational studies, maybe even some survey data, right? And then we can have a set of things that we can say, okay, maybe this is at the top of the list, right, of the majority of people. So maybe this is an important feature. Maybe we should prototype this, right, and come up with some ideas and design. A lot of the ideas you know, ideation is a real cyclic process, right? You're generating lots of ideas and then you're reducing them to things that are, you know, feasible. So what the students did in this sense is they really started to look at social presence or co-presence, which is another term we heard today. It is a technical term in 3D user interfaces and the literature. So it's certainly worth a search on that as well. And we sort of looked at, there's a number of pieces of literature that might you know, describe about, okay, it's a multi-user world. How do we go from, you know, 30 to 30,000, right? There's a lot of technical things in there to scale. And then talking about sort of the levels of participation that users might have in these social worlds, virtual worlds. So a couple of you know, approaches that they discovered in their literature search was like, certainly there's some medium that they could use. Some of it might you know, replace some reality. Some of it might augment it. They found that actually the browsers on the web are very capable, and in terms of their accessibility, this was a big point. There is a bunch of literature also about engagement with museums and the idea that if we gamify certain kinds of experiences, we can motivate and get more engagement. So there's certainly some literature there. And essentially also that there are experts in this area, right, in curation and environmental design. So when we're looking at an art gallery, you know, it's not just like putting up some posters in your dorm room, okay? There's a lot of considerations that curators take when they're designing an exhibition. So the first part the students did, or they made a survey. Are we solving the right problem? And they considered, you know, people across the world, Egypt and America, wanting to visit this new gallery show that was put up. And so could we do this in a virtual shared space? And then how would we interact with each other here? Again, we've been talking a lot about sort of the social and psychological requirements for these kinds of worlds. And some of the things that were discovered in the survey, right, we're thinking about who has control, right, inside this virtual space. If there's some multimedia to play, you know, maybe how do we communicate with other people in the space, right? Sometimes this is a private, sometimes it's a social activity. So they really kind of set up a survey. It was about watch parties. Okay, how do people experience multimedia in a shared environment? Okay, from the survey, you know, we found definitely a ranking of kind of what the kids are using these days. You know, in terms of Netflix at the top of the list, Disney, and then there's another one here. It's not. Yeah, maybe it's Hulu. Okay, so watch parties. And then what are the kinds of communication channels that they're using, right? So Zoom was obviously the most popular, and Discord a close second. So we kind of took those results of the survey and kind of boiled them down and found that, you know, what people thought about the primary control of a media or the movie, let's say, sort of made sense. There was a level where, you know, if I invite you to the watch party, I'm the one who gets to push stop and play, right? But that's really, you know, only one way of interacting with this multimedia content, right? So they started to think about different ways of situationally giving privilege to different users in the space. It turns out, surprisingly to me, that most of the users in these watch parties are actually using video chat on the side, not text, and very rarely audio. And so this kind of underscores a little bit more of, you know, where this this younger generation is interacting with each other and the importance of the facial cues. Okay. They also noted that a lot of these platforms are frustrating because, you know, you can't, if once you're in the Netflix watch party, right, you can't pull a title from somewhere else, or you can't bring someone in who doesn't have this account as well, right? So there was a little bit of kind of that frustration with the walled gardens that we've been hearing so much about. So that was an online survey. The students also went to our art center, and they did basically an anthropological kind of observation, and to understand how people do this in the real world, right? Who do they talk to? How do they move through the space? They went for several days over different times of day. They talked to the staff. They observed people watching, experiencing the artwork, and took notes. Here's a couple of pictures of our space, the lobby to the left, and one of the galleries there on the right. Okay, so again, kind of using content analysis and pulling out some categories of these observations. Some of the key things that we categorized was, okay, how do we provide direction and information for people when they come into the space and orient them, tell them where things are, right? What's allowed in terms of interacting with the objects. Obviously, most of these things in real life are do not touch. But also observing, you know, how people communicated amongst each other in the space. So friends coming in, that they kind of whisper, right? And maybe even a less frequent situation is, you know, a random person and you are next to the same artwork and you start up a conversation with them. It does happen, actually. And lots of interesting things there. But so kind of categorizing the design features into these areas. So again, thinking about the profiles and the privileges that might be used. So this is busy, but we kind of did prioritize these features categorically in the order. So being able to navigate through checkpoints in the space was a top one. Also being able to make chat groups for private chat, right, based on some level of permission or proximity. And this actually turns out to be one of the main things that they worked on. And then also who gets to control the audio video, who gets to see it. If my neighbor starts it and I just walk up, should I actually start where they are, or can I start my own? This is a very interesting human-computer interaction problem. Private chat, and also notes was one thing that they really felt was an important thing to try to understand more, is what are kinds of the interfaces where we could leave feedback for the artist or the curator, right? Or maybe even notes for my essay that I have to write for homework tomorrow because I went to the gallery. Okay, so you can dig into that a little bit more. What we decided to prototype, the student group decided to prototype, was basically this idea of finding an easy framework for navigating the gallery, easy ways to prototype different ways of chat, okay, proximity chat, as well as these notes, and also having multimedia embedded in the world. And so, pretty good challenges to go for. They started to think of then features to prototype. And you can see here they're pulling on some metaphors that we know from human-computer interaction. The idea about teleporting, with a little world in miniature, being able to, look at the art in its context in space, having the control of that multimedia artwork, and then communicating about it. Okay, so yeah, so that was probably like 3/4 of the semester, 2/3 of the semester, right? And now we've only got 6 weeks till the end, all right? So how are we going to do this? Well, thankfully, we have and this is published in earlier editions of this conference, our Fusality server. It's WebSockets and Node.js. It's not rocket science. But it is working in the browser and in the web and using platforms that, frankly, the students can code in their sleep, okay? So what they decided to do was we're going to use this multi-user platform, web-based, and we're going to demonstrate it and our prototypes with a couple of different models. So we have the Moss Art Center rendered and eventually collected and so on, published to X3D. I also put in some GLTF, the Sponza Courtyard. Decided, hey, let's make that an art gallery and make that multi-user. Okay, so now we've got 5 weeks left. They started to build to populate that space. Okay, so here we have images and narrations, and we need to be able to start these animations in a shared environment, okay? So as you can imagine, they're leveraging a platform like X3D, right? They have navigational metaphors. You can walk, you can fly, maybe navigate with an examine mode or something. You obviously have MPEG and other kinds of video and audio formats you can embed in the scene, okay? So that was pretty straightforward, again, using the web programming paradigm, okay? Not some kind of, not a deep graphics knowledge needed here, okay? Again, I'm in the 3D space, I want to leave a note, okay? So now I'm doing text entry, I'm saving something to a back end, right? I'm tagging it with permissions of who can see it or change it on the web, okay? 4 weeks. Now, so now we want to do this proximity chat. We're still prototyping, students are going, and how do we not only invite people, but also maybe have this idea that if I'm close to someone, we could start up an opportunistic conversation. Okay, so you can kind of see there's a few screenshots here. Again, we're in the Sponza Courtyard of GLTF, but we want to do interactive stuff, so we're using X3D, and we want to make it accessible to all the platforms, so we're using the browser and the web. And you can see your kind of typical readouts of who's in the world, where they are, and a few avatars walking around. So users are able to choose their avatar and their name before they go in. You've got your little world in miniature, pretty straightforward to click on a map and bind a new viewpoint. Okay, 4 weeks. All right, not too hard. But then we want to do that second feature, right? Embedding that multimedia in. Oh, we've got videos, we've got audio, and we want to be able to give the user manipulation control. So we're implementing a fast forward, start, close kinds of interactions. Again, inside the 3D world, inside the web browser. wanting to take some notes. Okay, well, again, we're in the web environment, so it's kind of straightforward to be able to use forms and all of the great HTML and JavaScript that we know. 3 weeks. Taking notes, and you can see that there's a history there, and being able to save them, come back to them, okay? Also prototyping this idea of proximity chat and invitations. So, and again, we're prototyping, so we can use quickly some HTML divs, right, in conjunction with the 3D world. Type it in, you can drop down, shows you the live users in the scene. Hey, let's talk to Joe, and send the invitation. Okay. 3 weeks. Okay, so how did we do? We didn't have a lot of time, obviously, to run a full study here, but in a matter of, we still have a report to write and a presentation to that crazy professor we have to give. So maybe we may not be able to scale up this evaluation the way we would like. We only got 4 users, but we did do one-on-one interviews with them, and we did both quantitative and qualitative evaluation. So again, one of the key methods in our user-centered design process. Okay, so we asked them to do a certain set of tests. How about feature A, feature B? We'll time them, okay? See if there was any differences, right, or points of frustration, moments of breakdown, and try to understand, which of these features are working well, which aren't. And there are actually what's known as discount methods in usability evaluation, where it's said you can find like 80% of your problems with about 6 to 8 users. Okay, so you can actually get quite a long way with only a few. We broke it down, again, to try to test those features we prototyped. So how are they able to jump around and navigate the space through the checkpoints in the map? How were they in terms of being able to manipulate and play the artworks? How was the proximity chat? And of course, the note-taking feature. So again, this isn't a complete study. Again, we only have 4 out of 5. We're using subjective, Likert scale here, 1 to 5. And we're asking them to rate, each of the features by their ease of use. And what we can say here is, some of these are actually done pretty well. The art on the audio feature, the note-taking feature, they're 4.5 plus on the median rating. So this is pretty good. But it also tells us that there's a few things we need to work on from a usability point of view. And that is the map navigation. It's probably the first one. It's got the lowest subjective score, right? And then the idea of proximity chats, that maybe we could streamline that selection and interaction process. I don't want to go into this here, but in the paper, we're also using Nielsen's usability heuristics. Okay, so this is, again, a well-known tool in practice. And we did include that in the paper in an appendix. So you can go through all of the usability heuristics from Nielsen and find the results that are a little more qualitative there. So kind of the big story, right, is that not only did this group score well, right, in their project, but they're also able to address a real relevant problem. Okay, they're able to do it with a methodology that's known, and they're able to do it in, under a semester. And by using X3D and browser-based technologies, this was something that was possible. So there's a lot of things to continue to work on and to explore. We're talking about social interaction in the metaverse. And so there's still lots of user-centered design to be done. And you can see some of the things that they thought about, maybe actually using the avatar and selection mechanisms to maybe initiate different kinds of interactions instead of going through the 2D drop-down list. Okay, that's a good idea. You know, being able to perhaps categorize the users in that list. Maybe some trusted, some not, don't know. Sharing among the chats with other things besides just text. And then, you know, providing some kind of way of where maybe if I wanted to improve that art gallery interactively with other people in the world, that we could make it actually more of a compositional or creation activity rather than, you know, just kind of a consumer of the art as well. So I think that's really exciting for us, and I wanted to thank all the reviewers for the great suggestions to bring this paper to publication, and look forward to answering any questions that you might have. Thanks.
Okay, so thanks for the great presentation. You're just in time. We have 5 minutes left. Are there any questions?
Hi there, thanks for the talk. I was wondering, did the users of the virtual art gallery know each other beforehand in the real world, and did that affect the kind of social interactions they had in the virtual world at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. In this case, it was probably half and half in the sense of they were pulling from the random list of people that they had surveyed and followed up with these interviews. I don't know though quantitatively who knew who, but that's a really important piece because when that proximity chat, maybe I don't recognize that name, maybe I do, and that's going to change, you know, my willingness to go through with that interaction. And I think that might be what they're kind of using here, this second bullet, the list of online users subset. Like maybe you have sort of levels of trust or your buddies, right? Your posse, and then you've got everybody else in there. That's a great feature question. Thank you, Mia. Oh, we have
any further questions? Okay.
Maybe did you observe some emotional reactions, like some users more engaged, more involved, and could you measure something? I don't know.
That's a great question. And no, we didn't do that in this case. The video recording is notoriously difficult for IRB approval, and but that would be a very important thing to be able to notice. Not, of course, the avatars here are not very expressive; they're very simple. But being able to see the user's reaction at the workstation and kind of the facial expressions there, I think would tell us a lot. We did not do it here though. How could you measure it? Right, good question. There's a few instruments to measure engagement. The gaming community tries this sometimes. You could also use, you know, the number of saccades or how they're focusing. You know, are they searching around? Are they spending lots of time on certain areas in the world? So these could be really fruitful kinds of data to have in situations like this, because if obviously there's a lot of things that aren't apparent in that virtual space that would be apparent if I was able to watch you working in it, right? And there would be a lot of that F star. Okay. Great. Well, I look forward to talking more with you tonight. I'm really excited about the evening event, and thanks so much for your attention.
Okay, before leaving for the event, we still have one remaining item, which is a message from one of our sponsors. So is from IVN, and we will play that video because they are not online. I think they're not available to speak, but they send us a short video. So Ziad, when you are ready.
Hello and welcome. Bonjour et bienvenue to Integrated Virtual Networks. So today I'm going to talk about real quickly about what our company is, about our technology, which is Silhouette, also about the future perspectives. So what are we going to do with Silhouette, and how you can contact us and get in touch with us. To do that, we first have to look at how it all began, right? So for the beginning of IVN, the base idea was that avatars use way too much computational power to be created, right? Which leads to less realism. So what we want to do in IVN with Silhouette, with the creation of Silhouette, is basically using a camera and a microphone, which is integrated in almost every PC nowadays, on your phone, basically everywhere, to create a live 2D avatar, which gives way more realism and less computational power, or computational load, sorry, compared to the conventional digital avatars. And this is Silhouette. So I'll show you a picture and a demo of it later on. But first, let's talk about the benefits of Silhouette. So for the benefits of Silhouette, sorry, it's basically a program that allows you to be live streamed from anywhere you want, because it can be from your phone, it can be from your laptop, it can be from your PC, and you don't need any sort of equipment, which means you don't need a headset, or you don't even need a green screen. So what will happen is basically you will get extracted from your background. So your background will disappear, and your silhouette of your body will be integrated into an environment. This allows for way more realism and at a lower cost for AR and VR applications. This also enables each user to appear in a variety of places within the virtual world. Within the virtual world, you can then move from one place to another and be able to hear and see people. You can even invite people over to your place, because everyone will have its own location. So you will really have several different points, which can be, e-commerce, business, school. You can have work areas. You can have social interaction areas like theaters, whatever, concerts, all these places where you can meet up with your friends and family by using Silhouette, basically. So they will see you and not an avatar of you. So this is just a quick snapshot of one of our demo. So obviously, you will see way better afterwards. How it looks like, but basically you will have this silhouette right here, and in an environment which is like looking like that. So this allows us to be, let me just put that up a little bit. This allows us to be way more better on certain points, better than headsets. Why? Because headsets cause anxiety, nausea, and eye strain. And they can also cause an uncanny valley effect. With Silhouette, you don't need a headset, so it will be way cheaper, and you will not have all these different issues that you could have by using a virtual reality headset. Next up, we have also, nowadays, so lately in the last 2 years, the market, the Metaverse market really got into a giant leap. So a lot of companies are investing in the moment into the virtual reality, and we all know where it's going to take us in a few years. So for the future perspective of our company, what's next? what's next for the future of the company. So first of all, we want to launch Silhouette on the X3D4 by the end of the month. Second of all, we want to engage individual companies and government and set them up with us. And thirdly, we want to have a public launch of the Nexus environment. So Nexus is basically the word we gave to the environment we created, you just saw before on the snapshot. And this will allow, like I said, people to go to work, school, or found an e-commerce or create social interaction in their own space. So let's talk about how you can contact us. Basically, first step to contact us would be on our website. So ivn.net. So once you click on the website, you will get to this logo right here, which you can click on, and this will lead you to this website right here. So there are several points on this website. First of all, you can click on read more below right here, which will give you, which will bring you to the contact information. So contact at info@ivn.net. Where are we located? What are the telephone numbers? Next up, you can also click on Silhouette, which will bring you to our virtual office directly. So you'll be able to navigate in our virtual office. I'll show you in a few seconds how this virtual office looks like with someone in it. So you'll be able to navigate. And if you want to join us and be part yourself, have yourself a Silhouette avatar in the virtual office, you can register here. And this will lead you to a website where you can put in your information and pre-register basically for before the launch and have special demos and be able to have your own Silhouette in the environment. If you would like to know more about IVN or Silhouette and have a demo session, you can really feel free to contact us at either at info@ivn.net or at my personal email address, yannick@ivn.net. I will be there to talk to you about, in more detail, obviously, about what we're doing in the company, about Silhouette, and I can also show you a demo, basically with you in it, so we can set you up in the environment if you're interested, and so that you can have your own Silhouette, basically. Thank you very much. Okay, hello again. We're here with Brett, our main developer, and he will talk to you about what we're doing in Silhouette.
Hi, folks. Welcome to the Nexus at Integrated Virtual Networks. We're developing the future of virtual reality with our patented Silhouette technology.
What have you been doing so far on Silhouette?
We're developing a space for education, entertainment, and scientific visualization that brings a unique perspective to the virtual reality experience. Just you and your Silhouette are in the 3D world and can explore the space for education, scientific visualization, and entertainment.
Thank you very much, Brett. So thank you very much for listening. If you need any more information, you can contact me, like I said, at info@ivn.net or at yannick@ivn.net. It was a pleasure to present our company to you guys, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Okay, thank you, Yannick. And the Silhouette. Okay, good. So let's close our day, the second day of the conference, and have some good time in the Tour Eiffel, built hundreds of years ago, much more solid than any metaverse you can imagine. So we have a few minutes just for some bio breaks and take our breath. The car will go from here at 6:30 and will bring you back. So you will not be lost in Paris. The car will bring you back in the same place around midnight. Yeah. Okay. So see you at the car door. Thank you all. Bye bye. Bye bye, people online. See you tomorrow morning. We will send you pictures.